Hi, Lynn. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
Um, I know that we had to reschedule, so I am so appreciative that you actually could make this happen. I know you're super busy. Yeah, you have such an interesting story to tell, and I wanted to give a little bit of background. So I met Lynn through another friend of mine, Jennifer, who's a runner. The three of us are runners. One time during lunch, we were talking about life experiences, and you mentioned that you had climbed Machu Picchu and Kilimanjaro. And during that lunch, I was craving for more, like to listen to more about your, both experiences. So then I emailed you and I asked you if you could come on my show, on my podcast, on my YouTube channel to talk about how you how you decided to do both and how your experience went about everything. So first of all, why don't you introduce yourself, to people who may be listening to this or watching this?
Hi. So my name is Lynn. I am a dentist who lives in New York City. I met Susie through running. Our mutual friend I had met through a 50-state running club. We run marathons, half marathons in all 50 states. I actually just finished that up in 2018. I finished all my 50 states. So, and then we also do 100 halves. So finished that up last year in 2019. So now just, running for fun. But yeah, so I do a lot of half marathons and marathons. And that's, yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations on all of them. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. I think I have 12 half marathons under my belt, so I have a long way to go to get to 50.
Be careful, it gets addictive. You'll get
Oh,
that.
I know. It's just such a shame that now with COVID, we're
I
like
know,
on
I feel bad.
standby.
I had a lot of friends who were planning to finish up this year, and they had maybe like 2 or 3 states left, and it's like everybody's just kind of on hold right now. And
Right.
it's a little harder to get motivated running when you don't have like a goal you're like training for, so it's tough, but
Right.
I'll be back someday.
Yeah, we're all in that same boat. Hopefully next year.
Yeah, hopefully next year.
So now let's talk about, this is such an interesting, Machu Picchu is, well, both Machu Picchu and Kilimanjaro, but those both experiences is something that I have on my bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you decide to, is this something you always wanted to do, or how did you?
No, so I decided to do Machu Picchu. So literally, I think I was 29 at the time, 28 or 29. I literally didn't even own a passport at that point. The only time I left the country was to go to the Caribbean and Mexico, and you didn't need a passport back then. So I literally didn't even own a passport. And I think the year before, the guy I was dating was like, you need to have a passport because what if we want to go somewhere? So I was like, all right, I'll get a passport. But I literally had never I had no stamps in my passport kind of thing. And my roommate at the time had gone to Peru for a wedding. So she had gone with her boyfriend to Peru for a wedding, and they were only there for 4 or 5 days. So they took the train to Machu Picchu. And when she came back, she was telling me how amazing Machu Picchu was, and how there was this 4-day hike to get there, and she really wished they had had the time to do the 4-day hike, and it was just so incredible. So yeah, so I was turning 30, and I guess I decided all right, that's it. I need to plan a trip. I'm gonna do something adventurous. So I decided I'm gonna do the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. So I called up my best friend and I said to her, do you want to come with me to Machu Picchu? And I don't know, for some reason I had this thing when I was turning 30, I didn't want a big deal made out of my birthday. So I knew my friends would try to throw me a party or something. So I purposely planned the trip to be away on my 30th birthday.
Oh, wow.
They decided to surprise me with a surprise a month for my birthday. So they still got their surprise party in.
Aww.
So they had a surprise party for me a month before the birthday because they knew I wasn't going to be home for my birthday. And then we had a couple weddings in between, so that was the only date that worked for everybody. And they're like, were you surprised? I'm like, yeah, because my birthday's not for a month.
That's so cool, though.
Yeah, so basically I called her up and I was like, let's go to Machu Picchu. She's like, great, I'm in, So we planned the trip, and it was kind of funny because we planned the trip. She decides to go. She was like, oh yeah, I guess I should tell my husband I'm not going, because she's married. And her husband's just kind of like you guys, how are you planning this trip? I'm like, I don't know. I found a company on the internet that like does Machu Picchu tours. Kind of, you know? So her husband and my dad were like freaking out about this because like the two of us were just kind of like, it'll be fine, we'll figure it out, kind of, you know. Yeah, so I booked the trip, and it was actually kind of funny because I remember getting off the plane in Puerto Rico, in Peru, and like when we got off the plane, like by the luggage area, because the company had said like there'll be a guy standing there with a sign with your name on it. And I'm looking and you see all these drivers with like names on the cards and I don't see anybody with my name on it. And I was like kind of panicking because I'm like, what if we booked this whole trip and there's nobody, it's like a scam and there's nobody here.
What year was this?
This was like 2009.
Okay.
So, and I remember just being like, because like all the whole, I'm like looking around the whole airport. Sure enough, I went outside and the guy with the sign was outside the airport. There were like 3 drivers outside, but I remember for like a 5-minute like window being like, oh my God, there's nobody here to pick us up. We're going to be stuck in Peru. Like all the drivers, like there was like probably like, 30 or 40 drivers and none of them had our name on it. But then sure enough, the guy was outside with like 2 other guys. Like, I don't know, he probably went outside to have a cigarette or something. We flew to Lima, Peru, and then took a flight to Cusco, Peru, and that's where they picked us up. So they picked us up in Cusco, and they, brought us to like a little boutique hotel in Cusco. We had 2 or 3 nights in Cusco before the trek. So they do like a little, it's called the Sacred Valley tour. There's some, archaeological sites there in Cusco that we had saw. And then like the night before the trek, they're like, your guide's going to show up to your hotel the night before and go over everything. So, what you need to know for the trip. So the guy showed up and originally like, because the company I had booked with, it said like group tours, usually between like 8 and 12 people, so we thought like there's going to be other people joining us on this trip. And when the guy got there, I was like, so how many other people like he's like, he looks at me, he goes, oh, just you 2. So we actually ended up getting our own private tour company. Like
That's amazing.
It was just the 2 of us, which was great. So we had our own private tour guide. And so, yeah, so then the next morning they pick you up at like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 in the morning. And they pick you up and then like, he's like, all right, so we have to go, it's going to be a couple hours drive to get, to the site. And he's like, oh, we have to pick up our porters along the way. So it's kind of funny because you're like literally like driving like the middle of nowhere, like through the Andes Mountains, and then like all of a sudden, like there's like 3 guys like sitting on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. And he's like, oh, those are our porters. Let's pick them. And I was kind of like, where did they come from? Like, there's like literally just like a huge valley and mountains for as far as the eye can see. And he's like, oh yeah, it's like a good like hour and a half hike for them to get here. Cause like the nearest village is like an hour from the road, so they get up at like 2 in the morning and like hike to the road to get picked up. And then, yeah, so then we got to the Inca Trail. And then, yeah, so it was basically, you have porters that carry all of your stuff, they bring tents and, food tents and tables and chairs and all your food and everything. You just bring like a sleeping bag and, like change of clothes, mainly, you're not showering for the 4 days, so you don't like need a full change of clothes, but, different shirts, change of socks, underwear, that kind of stuff. You pretty much wore the same pants the whole trip,
What time of the year did you go?
July.
Was that, so they are is that hot or, well, they're close to the equator, so it's probably warm the whole year.
Well, that's the thing. I think we thought it would be hotter than it was, but we forgot the fact that it's like up the mountain. So the first couple days it's like warm, but the last few days it's actually quite cold up like on the top of the mountain. It's like, it gets like in like the 30s, 40s by the time you get to the top of the mountain. So we were joking, we're like, we probably should have brought like thickers. Like this was one of those things, like we really didn't do a ton of research before we did this trip. And it's like, we were definitely like a little chilly, because I remember the 3rd night, like we woke up and there's like icicles on the outside of the tent. And we were like freezing cold because I had more of like a spring sleeping bag. It wasn't like a super warm sleeping bag. I think I brought long johns, but so the guy had told us at one point that if we're cold, he's like, take your water bottles. He's like, we'll put boiling water in the water bottles. And he's like, throw that in the foot of your sleeping bag. That'll keep you warm for a while. But yeah, and I was like, note to self, like definitely bring a thicker sleeping bag. So we were joking because we're like, yeah, we're just like, hey, it'll be fun. How bad could it be? So you know, like
Amazing.
by the time I did Kilimanjaro, I definitely like had like, you know, every like all my strategy like trip planning worked out, but you know,
Right.
so.
So when you're stopping in all this like different, like every night, is there anything where you're stopping? Like, did you encounter other people, other groups of people?
Yeah, so there's a ton of groups hiking as well. So yeah, and then the thing about the Inca Trail, there's a lot of archaeological sites along the way, and some of them are really interesting. So it's like almost by the time you get to Machu Picchu, you're like, it's all right, you know. Like I mean, Machu Picchu is the biggest one, but like there's so many others that you see along the way. So it's like you know, like versus like if you take the train to Machu Picchu is like wow, you know. But like there's a bunch of sites along the way that are really cool. So you do that throughout the hike. Yeah, so there's places to stop along the way. And then the campsites, you know, so to do the Inca Trail, you have to get a permit to do it. And I think it's like, I don't know how many thousand, it's like they allow like 3,000 or 4,000 people a day to start every day. So there's a good amount of people. But yeah, the campsites are different because like I remember the first night we camped, we like literally were like in somebody's backyard. Like there was like chickens walking around. Like we were talking to another group that was from Australia and they're like, yeah, there's a pig in the backyard with us. Like it was like literally somebody's backyard, you know, like, and we were eating dinner and my friend and I was joking with her. I'm like, I made sure to zip our tent really close really tight so that way none of the chickens get in, you know, like, yeah, so you're just like somebody's backyard. So, and then the next 2 days, it was like more of like a big like valley. So there was like a big campsite. And then on most of the campsites, they'll be like restroom facilities. It's literally like a little shack with a hole in the ground, you know, like it's not really like a bathroom.
Yeah, you do your thing standing, maybe like.
Yeah. It's actually funny because so you have to kind of, you know, you got to like, you know, squat and, you know, and I remember like, and like by then, like you have a little bit of altitude sickness, you're like a little bit shaky, you know. I remember on like the second day or something, like, you know, I got a little like pee on the side of my pants, you know, and I was like, I gotta wear these same pants for like 3 more days.
I'm sure at that point everybody's smelling anyway.
Right,
So.
yeah. And it was funny because like my friend I went with, she's like a major like germaphobe, like to the point like when COVID happened, I literally find myself channeling myself and going like, what would Adrienne do? She would not touch the doorknob with her bare hands. Like she's one of those people, like if she had to go to a public restroom like years ago, she would take a paper towel and touch the doorknob. Like she's like such a germaphobe, and like she was like, oh no, I totally peed on my leg earlier today. Like, and she was like cool with it, you know, like everybody, you know, everybody was, you know, so it's just, you know, that's how it is, you know, but yeah.
So what kind of food do they cook for you?
Oh, so the food was really good. So you have your own cook, you know, so I think we had 4 porters and a cook. And like, yeah, I mean, the amount of stuff these guys, like they're all like, cause like the guys who live in the Andes Mountains, like they're all little, like they're all like maybe like 5 foot, 5'2", like they're just the indigenous people in that area tend to be very short. They're very little, but these guys carry like 110 pounds on their back every day. And, so we're actually laughing because my best friend, she's like really tiny. She's only like 102 pounds. So at one point she was joking like piggyback ride, guys. And I'm like, she's technically under the weight limit. Like, so, and I was like, I think at the time I was like 115 pounds. And I'm like, damn it. I'm like 5 pounds over.
Did they all speak English?
No. So the guides, they don't speak English and they actually don't speak Spanish. They speak Quechuan, which is like a native of like a local language in Peru. But yeah, so we had 4 porters and we had our own cook and he cooked all kinds of stuff. Like, you know, there was like chicken, like a lot of food actually. Like one night I think we had like spaghetti and meatballs, like, you know, chicken and vegetables and mashed potatoes, and like they feed you like really well. So that's actually an interesting story. So it was just the 2 of us, and like, so normally there'd be like the cook cooking, and then the one of the porters would be like the waiter, like bring the food, you know, and he was just standing outside the tent. And the first night we were there, it was raining. And so he's standing outside the tent, and we asked, he didn't speak English. So only the guide spoke English. All we had 4 porters and a cook. They all only spoke Quechuan. I think one guy spoke Spanish because he was from Quito, but the other 4 just only spoke Quechuan. And the guide spoke Spanish, Quechuan, and English. So he was like translating for all of us. So yeah, the guy's like standing outside in the rain, and my friend kind of asked the guy, like, why is he standing in the rain? Why doesn't he just come in the tent? And the guy's like, well, no, he's not supposed to like bother you guys while you're eating dinner. And we're like, we're not going to be bothered. I'm like, to be honest, it's making me more uncomfortable having him stand there watching me eat while he's getting rained on. Like, just let him come inside the tent, you know? So he's like, okay, come inside the tent. And then, like, and then we're saying, like, there was so much food, and it was just the two of us, and we were both, like, you know, little at the time. So we'd only eat, like, half the food that he had made. And we asked the guide, like, well, what happens to all the other food? He's like, oh, the porters, they'll eat all that. Like, he's like, they're hungry. Like, they'll eat the rest
Right.
of the food. Because I guess they're, like, he's like, you know, normally the cook just makes them, like, rice and something more bland. So, like, they're always excited when the guests don't eat all their food because they'll eat, like, you know, what he cooked for us is much tastier, you know. So then the next night, we had asked the guide, we're like, well, if they're eating half the food, our food anyway, why don't we just have them come in and eat with us? And he kind of looked at us like, are you sure? Like, he's like, they're not supposed to be bothering you during dinner. We're like, no, like, let's get to know them, you know, like, let's, like, and so he was like, oh, that's really nice, you know. So the next 2 nights, we actually had the porters come in and eat dinner with us, and it was really nice. Like I said, they don't speak English, so the guide was, like, translating amongst all of us. But it was kind of cute to, like, get to know them, you know. Like, the one guy, he was funny. He asked us, because we're like, I guess the guy had asked him, do you have any questions for them? And he had asked us, because I guess he had said, like, they carry these big, heavy packs, and a lot of the trek is actually downhill, because Machu Picchu, you get to the height of the mountain on the second day. And so that Machu Picchu itself is actually lower elevation than the peak. So second day you get to the peak, and then the third and the fourth day are actually downhill. So I guess he was saying, like, when you're going downhill, it's hard to go slow, and sometimes there's people in front of him, and he wants to just, like, run down the hill, because with the heavy pack on, he wants to just run, and there's people in the way, he's got to go slower, and it's harder for him. So he was asking, like, what could he say, can we teach him something in English to say to get people to move out of the way? So we said, we're trying to think of, like, what's the easiest phrase. So we told him, we said, like, watch out, porter coming. And so then we taught him how to pronounce that in English. And he was, like, so happy. Like, I'm sitting there, like, how long has this guy been a guide and nobody told him how to say, watch out, porter coming, you know, like. And it was, like, the next day, like, at dinner, he, like, looks at us, he's like, oh, it worked. Like, people got out of his way. He was so happy, you know, so it was kind of cute. And I remember one of the guys asked us, he's like, you know, so you're from New York City, my best friend's from Boston. And he's like, you know, like, we see, like, New York City in the movies and stuff. And he's like, because, like, when you go to, like, even, like, Lima, like, there's, like, donkeys and, like, alpaca and stuff in the streets and everything. And they go to us, like, we hear New York's so crowded, you, like, don't even have room for animals. And we're just, like, kind of laughing. Like, well, I don't think people need, like, a donkey in the middle of New York City. I'm like, it's more just pets. Like, yeah, there's some dogs and some cats and stuff, but, like, yeah, people are, like, pulling donkey carts in the middle of New York, you know. So it's so cute, because he just couldn't understand. He's like, you just don't have room for animals. And it was like, I don't think that's why we don't have donkeys in the middle of New York City. But,
yeah. I was are in zoos, except for dogs and cats. The other sites that you mentioned, how big are they? Like, before you get to Machu Picchu?
So they're not as big as Machu Picchu. Like, most are maybe half the size of Machu Picchu. You know, they're still, you know, they're still big. They're still, you know, pretty, you know, they're all, like, stone, in a similar style of Machu Picchu. They're all that, like, polished stone that, like, fits together perfectly. I mean, that's the thing about Machu Picchu that's so amazing, is it's all put together with, like, no mortar. It's just the stones that they, like, carved, and they fit together perfectly, and they've stayed together for however many thousands of years. So all the sites are like that, where they're just, yeah. So there's one that's, like, almost kind of like a half circle shaped one that's really cool. So it's like this big round circle, and it's just like, how do they get these stones to fit together like that, and, like, perfectly, and, you know, it's like on the perfect curve, you know, it's, like, amazing. Yeah, so they're all, yeah, the ones on the way are all really interesting. But yeah, they're not as big as Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is definitely, like, the biggest one.
So what kind of people do the Inca Trail? Is it mostly Americans? Or did you?
It's a lot of Americans. It's a lot of Australians. I find when you do any kind of hikes like this, it's definitely, like, number one, it's Americans. Number two, it's Australians. Then you'll meet a lot of, like, German, British. I would say that's probably, like, 80% of the people, like, fall into those categories. I mean, you do meet some people from Asia, you know, like, you know, you do. It's, yeah, you don't meet a lot of South Americans doing the Inca Trail. I mean, which is interesting, but I guess there's some, there's some like Argentinians and Chileans and stuff, but yeah, a lot of it's Americans. Yeah.
Do you feel like anybody can do the Inca Trail? Like with any, or do you have to be in shape to do
Oh, you want to be, you need to be in shape to do the Inca Trail. Yeah. Like it's definitely, it's high altitude. I think it tops out about 14 or 15,000 feet. So the second day is like pretty much all straight uphill. So it's, it's definitely, that's tough, and it's all stone steps. So it's not just, it's a little different than just like hiking a regular mountain, because it's all these like stone steps that are a little bit uneven. So definitely you need to, you can't have bad knees or like, anything like that, like be a little shaky, because you trip over the stones and whatnot. So you want to be in, fairly decent shape. Like I think altogether it's like, there's an Inca Trail marathon where I think you do the whole trail as a marathon. So I think it's roughly around that, like 25 or 30 miles that you do. And you do it over it's basically 3 days. So I think you're doing like 8 miles a day, most like 7 or 8 miles a day. So it's a decent amount of, you want to be in decent shape for that. Cause yeah, it's like the first day is pretty much, you get there early in the morning, you pretty much hike all day. Like you hike in the morning and then you have lunch, you stop for lunch, and then you hike till maybe about 4 and set up camp and have dinner. And then same thing the next 2 days. And then the last day you wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, because the goal is to get to Machu Picchu, like to the Sun Gate, which overlooks Machu Picchu. So you want to get there before the sun rises, so you can watch the sun rise over Machu Picchu, which is just beautiful. So yeah, so that day, that's a shorter hike. You're only hiking for maybe like an hour or two. I forgot how far that was. I don't feel like it wasn't that long of a hike. Yeah, but maybe an hour or two. But you want to get there before sunrise and then watch the sunrise. And then you have the whole afternoon to like actually tour around Machu Picchu, and then they'll take you down to Aguas Calientes. So, and it's rich because Machu Picchu is so high up that all the roads leading up there are like switchbacks. So the bus has to like take you down the switchbacks to Aguas Calientes. And, so you can walk around there for a little bit, and then they usually had like a train ticket set for you to go home, whatever time the train was, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. And they just told you like, the porter's going to leave you, you can walk around Machu Picchu at your leisure. Aguas Calientes, you can go have lunch there, but just make sure you're at your train at like 4 o'clock or whatever. It's like, there'll be somebody waiting there with your tickets, So we got there and there was somebody waiting with our tickets, and then you take the train back. And the same thing with the train. Because it's so hilly, there's a section where they have to do the train on switchback as well, where they like take the train up and then they stop and they like engage in reverse, and then they switch back and then they switch back up again, so it's kind of cool. And then yeah, so you get back to Cusco pretty late. I think we got back there like 8 or 9 o'clock, and then just went to the hotel to sleep. So.
Is it crowded once you get to Machu Picchu? Well, this was a few years back, but
yes, well, it's still limited. Like, so you have to get a permit. There's a limited amount of how many people can go per day. I mean, back when I went, the permits were always maxed out. Like, so we booked, so the actual Inca Trail, I think it's like 3,000 or 4,000 people they allow, and they book up like 2 to 3 months in advance, because we had booked our trip, like, I mean, we went in July. I think we booked our trip in like March. And then another girlfriend of ours like heard about it, and she's like, oh, I want to come too. And that was like May or June, and she couldn't get a permit. They basically told her like, it's already booked, so we can't add you to the, because I was like, call the tour company, see if they can add you to our tour. And they're like, well, we can't, because there's no permits left to get for you to get into Machu Picchu. So there's the 3,000 or 4,000 people who come off the trail, which is always interesting because we're all like dirty and sweaty and gross and stuff. And then you get all the like the day tours, like looking all cute in their little sundresses, like doing selfies, and it's like, they're there for their, like, I guess there was an Instagram back then, but their little like photo shoots and stuff. I guess now you get the Instagram photo shoot.
It would be on Instagram, yeah.
So that's like, so there's, the train runs all day, and I mean, however many people get off the train. So it's decently crowded. So the nice thing about Machu Picchu is, when you get there, because you get there at sunrise. So you have the first like hour or two, it's just the hikers, so it's not so crowded, because the first train doesn't get there till, I don't know, like 9 or 10 in the morning, and you're there at like 7. So you have a couple hours where it's not so crowded, and then it does start to get crowded, because there's another mountain called Huayna Picchu. That's like, if you ever see the pictures of Machu Picchu, it's like Machu Picchu and there's a mountain in the background. I actually have a picture over there. So if you want to zoom in on it. This is Machu Picchu. So that's Machu Picchu, and then that's
amazing.
Picchu. So you can hike that. But basically the guide said, like, if you want to do that, because you have to get a ticket to do that. And he's like, if you want to get a ticket to do that, he's like, you need to go, like, as soon as you get to Machu Picchu, get your ticket, because once the trains get there, then like all the tickets for the day get sold out to do Huayna Picchu. I don't think we ended
up. Is there something there, like up on top of that mountain?
So we didn't actually end up doing Huayna Picchu because, like I said, I wasn't, on my researching game and everything at that point. And I bought hiking boots that like fit on like my normal size. Like I wear an 8, I bought an 8 size hiking boot. Never do that, especially if you're hiking a mountain. Because what happens is, it's like running shoes. You always want to buy them a few sizes up. So especially if you're hiking downhill a lot, like your foot slides into so by the end of the trek, my toenails were like my big toes were like so black and swollen that I was just kind of like, I can't hike another hill. I can't hike another mountain. I'm like, I told my friend if she wanted to go, she could go. And she's kind of like, I'm all right. I think more people, there's not anything up top there. It's just, you get a really nice bird's eye view of Machu Picchu when you get to the top, and like the whole Sacred Valley, the whole area, like the whole Andes mountain range. So it's just more like the view from the top up there. So
right, I imagine, because it's pretty high.
Yeah, my feet hurt, my toes hurt so bad that I was just kind of like, yeah, I don't want to put my hiking boots, because once we got to Machu Picchu, I had to take my hiking boots off and put flip-flops on, and I just like looked at my toes and I was like, I'm not putting my hiking boots back on.
So what is the thing you like the most from that whole experience? What is the one thing that you said, this was an amazing moment? Or
one thing, yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to pick just one thing, like it was just like the whole experience was just, great,
I have had this on my bucket list forever.
Yeah.
My father had a book. He probably still has it around the house, with pictures from interesting places around the world. And I remember it was Grand Canyon was there. Machu Picchu was there. Kilimanjaro was there. And then and then there was like these beautiful pictures. It was a big book. And then an explanation of the country, like where that place was located. So I used to look at it as soon as I learned how to read, I was like looking at them. Yeah. And I was like, I want to go here. Yeah. I always thought had to be such a cool experience.
Yeah, I mean, it is, because it's like, I mean, the hiking itself is just beautiful in the mountain range. Like, it's absolutely beautiful. And like it's also the hike. There's a lot of like little villages along the way, which is crazy to think some of these people live up in these like remote areas. So there's like, you can engage with the people in the villages, and then like there's like alpaca and donkey and stuff along the way. So the hiking itself is interesting, but then it's also nice because pretty much, yeah, at least like once or twice a day, there's like another site to stop and see. So it makes the hike even more interesting, Yeah, it's definitely it was a cultural experience too. Like I remember when we got there, the guide's like, oh, we're just gonna stop at the market because Rolly, the cook, needs to get some chicken, and I'm thinking like we're going to like a supermarket for him to get chicken. And we go to a market, and it's like a market with like live chickens running around, and the guy's like asking me like, do you want to pick your chicken? I'm like, no, I don't want to pick my chicken. Like, I'm like, you just pick a chicken for me, but it's like literally like chickens running around, and then like he's like the cook's like picking chickens. But it was actually really cute too, because I guess on the way there, my friend had told the guide like, oh, it's her birthday tomorrow. and he was asking us like, so what do you do for your birthday in America? Because he was like, in Peru we have guinea pig, like that's like their like delicacy for their birthdays. And I'm like, yeah, more of a cake, you know, like. So I guess on the way there in the car, he must have told the cook, because in Quechuan, that like it's her birthday, make a cake. So on the second day when we woke up, they had a birthday cake made for me, and it said like "Happy Birthday, Lynn," and I was like, "That's so amazing."
How did you? Oh my God! How would you make that? Like a
Yeah,
cake in the middle
I
of the
asked that
mountains?
too. I'm like, "There's no oven. How did you bake a birthday cake?" And he's like, "Dutch," because like everything he's cooking is like on like little like kerosene burners or like literally like fire pits, you know, like. So I'm sitting there like, how is he cooking a birthday cake, you know? Apparently a Dutch oven, like he had like, he put it in a Dutch oven and put it on the fire and it baked a cake. You know, it was more
Oh
like
wow!
it was more like a pound cake. I mean, it wasn't like Betty Crocker, you know, cake, but it was pretty, I think it had like icing and everything, and it was like all decorated.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
You actually, I think I have a picture of the cake.
And just so you guys see this, she has pictures. For those of you who are not on YouTube, she has pictures on her wall, and now she's going to show us.
I had
Okay.
a book made. So this is us. This is the morning we got to Machu Picchu. So that's the two of us like
Oh
overlooking
my
Machu Picchu
God,
there.
that's
This is like
amazing.
my favorite picture from the whole trip, like the two of us just. And so the amazing thing too about by having our own private guide, because normally most of the other groups there were like groups of like 10 or 15 or, you know, even 20 people, or there maybe be like 3 guides for the whole group. So a lot of people were just kind of hiking by themselves throughout the day, and then you'd meet back up for lunch. But because there were only 2 of us, our guide stayed with us the whole day. So there were a lot of places where he'd be like, "Give me your camera," and he'd be like, and so because he's the guy, he does this all the time. He knew all the perfect picture spots, you know.
Right.
So he like took some of the most amazing pictures, like because he was like, "No, no, no." Like you see pictures, people taking a picture somewhere, and he'd be like, "No, no, no, come over here, stand on this rock, I'll take the picture." And then it was like, "Wow, that's an amazing picture." So this day, he like that morning, he was like, "Just give me your camera," and I'm like, "What do I want?" He's like, because the two, he's like, "One of you take the pictures you guys want to take," but he's like, "Give me one of your cameras," and then he took a whole bunch of pictures, but this one was like one of my favorites. Yeah, so this is us starting out on the
Oh
way.
wow.
So this is us right before we got started. And
That was going to be my other question. If there were like trees along the way, or if it was pretty.
So here's our campsite with all the chickens running around.
Very nice.
Yeah, so that's Freddie. That was our guide, Freddie.
Look at that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, so here's the birthday cake.
That's unbelievable.
Right?
It looks like a cake bought from a store.
Yeah, so that's Rolly and Richard. Rolly's the cook. He made my birthday cake.
This is so amazing. For those of you listening on the podcast, you're going to have to go to the YouTube channel and see the pictures.
Yeah, but so like this is the peak. This is like when you get to the top.
Amazing. It's
I
incredible.
was like, I had a little altitude sickness this day, so you can see I don't look too happy in this picture.
Well, you look tired too. I mean,
well, no, what it is I had so a lot of altitude sickness gives you like stomach aches. It makes you like, it kind of slows down your diet, so you get a little like constipated. And then what happens is like the air in your stomach kind of it pushes into your diaphragm, so it's like harder to, you get like a side stitch pain, but like a really bad side stitch pain when you breathe. So I had that. So yeah, I wasn't feeling great that day, but I kind of, I pushed through. And then I learned better for Kilimanjaro. But yeah, so that's like one of the archaeological sites that we stopped.
oh my God, that alone is just.
Right? So as I was saying, like you see all these sites. But yeah, so he took like all these like great pictures of us, like, and like a lot of like candid shots of us, just kind of like, stopping, taking a break, like, so we got like amazing pictures from him. But yeah, it's interesting. Like parts of it are almost like rainforest, like jungly.
And look at the steps right there. You can see.
So the majority of the trail is like this. So it's all these like carved out stone steps, which is like amazing to think that somebody like dragged all those steps somewhere. So yeah, and all these like little archaeological sites along the mountainside there.
Very neat.
Yeah, so these are all the archaeological sites along the way, besides just Machu Picchu. So it's really beautiful. Yeah, but this is when you wake up in the morning. This is like you wake up to see the sunrise and watch the sunset over Machu Picchu. So, but yeah, it's like a really cool, you know. So
Those are really good pictures too for,
yeah, and so this is like the view you get. This is Machu Picchu down in the valley there, and this is like the view you get on the morning of getting there. So yeah, it's really cool.
what a trip. That's a lifetime
Yeah, and
experience.
then just like I said, like the stones are like so amazingly like fit together perfectly, perfectly polished. Like it's just the art, like the engineering feat of it. It's just crazy. And apparently, it's survived like 3 earthquakes, and like it, you know, like it's just, and I forget, I mean, how many of the thousands of years old it is, but it's just really amazing. And it's kind of interesting too, because for the most part, everything stays together, but there's like a couple areas where I guess some rocks have fallen down and they've like tried to put it back together again. And like, you could tell where like they've like people have repaired it because like they're using mortar to like keep the stones together. And it's kind of like, you know, like you think you guys are cheating here, you know, like you could definitely tell where they repaired things because it's like, this is not as good as like when the Incans did it, you know? So.
Right. That's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
So now let's go to Kilimanjaro, completely
Okay.
different continent,
Right.
different experience. I mean, I haven't done it either, but
Right.
I also have it on my bucket list. So how was this also like one of those, let's go to the Kilimanjaro?
So I think what happened is like when we were doing the Inca Trail, a lot of people who had done like, you know, because there's like other groups there, you know, we met a lot of the people along the way, especially like you kind of find like there's certain people that you kind of hike at the same pace. So you'll run into the same groups like, you know, every day, you know, so you kind of like, you know, and also at the dinner camps, we kind of like make friends with other people and some of the other tents and stuff. And a lot of people there were talking about their experiences doing Kilimanjaro. So it kind of just seemed like the next, you know, the next adventure, you know. So I decided to do Kilimanjaro. So Kilimanjaro was a little different experience because I did it just myself. So this time, like I did a lot of research before we did Kilimanjaro. So I found like one of the best companies on the mountain that does, so they're called Alpine Ascents. If you ever want to do Kilimanjaro or any kind of mountain climbing, I highly recommend them. They're amazing. Like they do Everest, like they're one of the premier companies on like Everest on every major mountain. Like they don't skip on anything, you know. So so I picked them, you know.
I'll put a link, in
Sorry?
the show notes. Yeah, I'll put a link to the
Yeah, so
website.
they're great. Like to the point that like, so like we had this like big tent for like that we'd eat like lunch and dinner at. It's like clearly the biggest out of anybody else's on the mountain. So he was saying like there's one day where there's only one spot that tent will fit. So he's like, our porters have to get there first because everybody wants that spot. So he was saying like there's a guy whose job it is to like wake up in the middle of the night, and like he knows his job depends on the fact that like he has to get there first and like get, because it's like if he doesn't get that campsite, like all hell will, like there'll be hell to pay. But like, so their thing is like there's like they pay a guy whose job it is literally just to wake up in the morning and hike up in the like pitch dark out to get to the to get to the lunch spot first, so nobody else takes their lunch spot, you know. But like, I mean, that was like, so like, yeah, so Machu Picchu was definitely like a little bit more rustic of a camping experience. My Kilimanjaro was like the luxury. Like we had like flowers on the table, like, you know, like it was definitely no expense spared on the Kilimanjaro trip, but it was really great. Like, and because like I said, I did get some altitude sickness on Machu Picchu, which did make the hike a lot harder. Like a lot of the, like there were a couple days I really didn't feel good. Because it's just really, you can't get a deep breath in because it just hurts so bad, and then it makes it harder to breathe. You get more lightheaded because you're not getting those deep breaths in. So I kind of wanted to go with somebody a little more experienced this time to really kind of make sure I could, like, there's ways to treat altitude sickness along the way and not wait till it gets to that point. So I wanted to go with a company that was gonna, like, so with Killimanjaro, like our guide Eric for that he was great about that. Like he was checking in on everybody, like, how are you feeling? If you're doing this, you need to feel this. You need to drink more water now. You should take some Advil. You should take the or like what you eat. Don't eat any meat today. Only eat. So if you're gonna do something like this with altitude sickness, stick to more like easily digestible, like carbohydrates. Don't eat anything really fatty or like protein, because it just sits in your stomach longer, and it causes, so what happens, gas builds up in your stomach, and then it pushes up into your diaphragm. And so every time you try to breathe, it like pinches off at the top of your stomach, and then it's just painful. So,
Right.
So when we did Kilimanjaro, I went with that company, and he like, cause on the second day I was starting to feel the same things I was feeling in Machu Picchu, and he was like really on top of it. He was like, just do this, do that. And like, so like that night I didn't feel great at dinner, but he was like, just eat nothing but carbs, drink a lot of water. He's like, go lie down, have this medicine, he's like, take Gas X, take what is it, Diamox. And then, the next morning I woke up and I felt fine. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much better. Like, I'm not going to just feel awful the whole trip, so.
So how was the experience getting to, where do you fly when you want to go to Kilimanjaro?
Kilimanjaro, it's in Tanzania. So you fly into Arusha, Tanzania. And so Arusha is basically like the dropping off point for all, either people who are going to do Kilimanjaro or people who are doing safaris. And, if you're going to, the Serengeti for a safari, your base would be Arusha. So that's, kind of more of like a touristy town. So we flew into Arusha, spent one night in Arusha. I think the next day we got up, so with that, like I said, I had booked on my own. So that company, there were 8 other people altogether. So we met the rest of the team and the guide the next day. He went over all of our packing, like basically went through everything you brought and made sure you had everything you need. Like he made sure you had gloves and boots and socks and water and, like made sure you had anything, like headlamp, like, because his thing is like he was a very experienced guide, and he's like, I don't want to get on a mountain and be with somebody who's struggling because like they didn't have like warm enough layers, or they didn't have the right boots or whatever. He's like, I guess there are stores in Arusha that sell this kind of stuff. So also I think a lot of like that sell like reused kind of stuff. A lot of people who do the trek will then kind of sell their stuff to these stores in Arusha, and like the guides and stuff will buy stuff cheap there. So he's like, we could find stuff for you if you're missing anything, and make sure everybody's bags get there, because the other issue is, if you're flying, make sure nobody's bags. He was saying how, I think the trip before, 2 weeks prior, like 3 of the people on the trip, their hiking bag like got lost out by the airline and like didn't make it to Tanzania. And he's like, they have to leave at a certain date, they have to leave. So it's like, they got to find people all their stuff, if they're not going to get the bag to them by a certain time, then like you're kind of screwed,
Right.
So, so he went over all of our packing and made sure we had everything we needed, kind of gave us some tips for about hiking and everything, and went over all the tent assignments and everything, because like I was by myself, so I was put in another tent with another woman who was also solo. There was a family of 4 from Austria. They were actually doing it because it was the dad's 60th birthday. And he wanted to, because I guess he used to work in South Africa. They were from Austria, but he used to work in South Africa because he was like an engineering consultant or something. So he used to work at like mining in South Africa or something. So I guess he was saying his first trip to Africa, they flew over Kilimanjaro, and he saw that. He was like 25 at the time, and he's like, I'm going to climb that one day. Like, so that was like his dream. So for his 60th birthday, he brought his whole family to climb Kilimanjaro. And then there was another guy, this guy Mike, who I'm actually still friends with. He was turning 40, so that was his like 40th bucket trip. He said him and his wife agreed that they both get a trip, no expenses spared. But I'm like, where's your wife? And he's like, she hates mountains. He's like, she doesn't do well with altitude, so they just agreed that like he could do his trip by himself, and like she'll do her own trip, and like and it's kind of like, okay, as long as you have an understanding. So so we did that. So there was and then there was another guy as well, another single guy. Well, there was 2, another guy and a girl. They were both friends. One was from the States, one was from England. And the 2 of them were hiking together as well. So we met up with everybody in Arusha, and then we were there, I think 2 nights. And then the morning of the hike, they kind of like come pick you up, and same thing. It's like you have to drive whatever 2 hours or 3 hours. You get up super early, and you get to the base of Kilimanjaro.
So how many days are you hiking?
So there's a couple of routes up. Kilimanjaro. I did the Marambe Route, so there's the, what is it called? Marambe Route, which they call the Coca-Cola route. So that route is faster. That's like 5 days. And they actually have huts for you to sleep in but that's like the more touristy route they claim. But you actually have less success because it's only 5 days. I knew, because I had altitude sickness with Machu Picchu, I opted for the 7-day trek because I just figured if I spread it out over more days, it's not as much altitude change per day. So I just felt like I'd feel better. And then the Marambe route's like the more interesting route, they say. Like, it's like you're like literally like boulder scaling on certain parts of the mountain. Like, it's not as crowded, but that used to be intense for the Marambe route. And there's another one, and then there's another route that goes straight down the mountain. So you go down a different route. So there's a route that you can go straight down. So that's for everybody who's descending, or like if they're resupplying things on the mountain, like they'll bring food or medical supplies up the mountain. They'll go up that one because it's quick. And then I think there's a third route up the mountain. I forget which that's called. But I recommend the Marambe route. That's like definitely for like, if you're like a little more adventurous hiking, that one's like is the recommendation for that. Yeah, so you get to the Marambe Gate. So this is all of us at the start, the Marambe Gate.
Very nice. And there's an actual gate. There's an arch. Yeah.
So then, so it's a 7-day hike. So the first day, you do a decent amount of altitude. The first day, I think that one's pretty high. And so with every mountain climb, the strategy is always to climb high and sleep low. So you're actually you climb up to maybe say 12,000 feet the first day, but then you'll actually hike back down to 10 and sleep at 10. And then the next day you might climb up to 14 and then hike back down to 12 and kind of do it that way. So that helps you acclimate to, it's like they do that in everything, even like Everest. There's certain days they'll just climb up and then climb back down, just wait to acclimate to the altitude. So with this, we kind of would like snake up and then snake down. So yeah, it was like, so the first 4 days were like that. And then the 5th day was kind of more just straight up. And then, so then you camp out high altitude on the 5th day. There's 2 camps you can camp out. We camped out at the higher one, which is nice because the last day is the hardest day of Kilimanjaro. So it makes the last day a little easier because you kind of get like an hour and a half head start out of everybody else. So yeah, and apparently I asked the guide, like, well, why are we the only ones camping up here? And he's like, our company paid off the government to get a special campsite a little higher up than everyone else. And he's like, it's Africa, he's like, a little money talks, so he basically said, he's like, this, it's like, because I guess the high camp is it gets a little dirty down there because it's like, there's no running water at that camp. The other camps, there's like running water and stuff. So he was saying like the bathrooms there get a little dirty. So he's like, we just paid off the government to get our own special camp a little higher up, 1,000 feet higher up. So it also makes the hike the next day easier. So I was like, all right.
So when you're walking, like when you're climbing Kilimanjaro, are there towns or like little villages? There's no one there.
There's nothing on the mountain. Yeah. So yeah, it's a very different experience than Machu Picchu because Machu Picchu, like there's little villages. Like I said, there's like all kinds of stuff. There's archaeological sites. There's all kinds of stuff along the way. Kilimanjaro is just you and the nature that you see. So it's just, but it's really interesting because it is beautiful. It's like very different zones. Like the first few days you're like hiking through the trees. It's more like rainforesty. Then you kind of get to this kind of like weird, like deserty, like cactusy area. Then there's one day that's like it's called a Bronco Wall. It's like, you're like boulder hiking. So, but yeah, so you can see it's like all this like really pretty, like,
oh wow,
like cactusy kind of stuff in certain areas.
Do you see wild animals?
So not a ton, because like the conditions on there are pretty harsh for animals. You see a lot of small animals, but yeah, not a ton of animals. And yeah, so then the one day it's actually like a boulder climb up the side of the mountain. You don't need to be like harnessed in, but like you're definitely like, as one of the girls called it, hugging a rock in the whole day.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, so it was definitely, so like, yeah, it's like, it's more like, a little more adventurous kind of hiking that one day. Yeah.
So how many people were, like you mentioned, there's like 8, 10 people, like tourists, like people doing the Kilimanjaro, but
Mhm.
how many porters did you have?
Oh, we had a ton. So we had
Okay.
one American guide, 3 Tanzanian guides, and then like 30 porters,
Oh,
because
wow.
all the food and like, because like I said, like this was like the luxury of like mountain climbing. So like they brought up, because normally there's like porta potties, like, you know, there's like the, like literally, like I said, like the little shack with a hole in the ground. So this company brings up its own little toilet. So they bring like what's like an adult sized porta potty with its own little tent. So you actually have a seat to sit on, which is amazing. Like, you don't realize how amazing that is when you have mountain climbing, but like that is a luxury you're willing to pay for. Like,
Right.
yeah, I'm like having to just like, because you're, like I said, like your digestive system's a little slower, so you know it takes a little longer for things to kind of make its way through, and you're also a little bit shakier because you have altitude sickness. So to be able to like we had like a little tent for like, so yeah, there was one guy who just had to carry the toilet like up, you know, like, but so yeah, they had like 30 porters because they had tents, they had tables and chairs and all this food, and like the food spread was like ridiculous. Like there was so much, like it was like a full buffet of like chicken and meat and, you know, rice and mashed potatoes and vegetables and like all this food, so much food. So yeah, so this is all of us. This is the whole crew here.
Very nice.
That's all the and the porter,
Alcohol.
yeah. So there was like 30 porters with all of us, because they give you like snacks, and oh, this is us hugging a rock. That's me hugging the rock.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so we had all together, there was the 10 of us, and then because they'd carry your personal stuff as well. So you had a tent, and but like I said, Machu Picchu, they basically just gave you a tent. You had to bring your own sleeping bag. Here you had to bring your own sleeping bag, but they carried all your clothes, your you had a tent, they'd have mattress pads for you. And then like when you get to your tent every night, they give you like a little bowl of like hot soapy water and a washcloth, so you could give yourself like a little sponge bath at night, which is also like another little luxurious thing on a mountain, which was really great. So there was probably 30 Tanzanian porters with the group. So it was a big group, yeah.
Right. So once you get to the top, is it like substantially colder than at the bottom?
Yes, it is freezing. Okay. So yeah, you're definitely wearing, you know, your winter jacket, you know, like your puffy coat. And so yeah, the last day is the push to the top. And the same thing, the goal is to get there at sunrise. So you literally wake up at midnight, and it takes anywhere between 5 and like 7 or 8 hours to get to the top. I mean, we were a little slower because, you know, still had a little bit of altitude sickness by the last day, a little bit of a headache. And just very hard to breathe by the time you get there. Like you literally, like I'm a runner, and I'm normally, if I'm feeling absolutely miserable during a marathon, when I see the finish line, I like get this second wind and I can like sprint to the finish line. Like,
right.
I don't care how bad I'm feeling, like I just want it over kind of feeling. And I remember getting to the top, seeing the top, and just wanting to run to the top, and I physically could not do it. I was like shuffling to get there. Like, so you're just like very slow little steps, so it takes a while. Yeah, so the last, and the push to the top, it's switchbacks because it is so high up. So you're literally just kind of like switchbacking back and forth, and it's just, I mean, you're doing that for like 6 or 7 hours, and it's pitch black out because you're going at night, so you just have a headlamp on. So you can't see anything. You have no idea when you're getting near the top or anything. Like, that's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, is getting to the top of that. But then, yeah, so you get to, well, because Kilimanjaro it's a dormant volcano, so it's a crater.
Right.
So you get to the top of the crater, but that's not actually the peak of the crater. So you get to the top, and there's like, I mean, there's this, you know, the famous sign that's, so it's Stella Point. So that's like the sign everybody stops and takes a picture at, you know. But then there's actually another, so actually we were joking because the group, so there was like 4 or 5 of them who were faster, so they went ahead of us, and then there were like the other 4 of us that were a little slower. So, but we're joking because when they got to the top, it was still really dark out, so we were like, oh, we were just waiting for better lighting for our pictures. Because when we got there, it was like perfect. Like, We had like perfect lighting, you know. So we're like,
Oh
oh,
my God, that's
we're
amazing.
waiting for the better lighting. Yeah, so this is the Austrian family. It's Franz and Maria.
And you're completely bundled up in clothes.
Yeah, you can see.
I can tell it's cold.
You can see it's freezing cold out. So I have on, I think I have 2 jackets on. I have a snow jacket on. I got like a hat on, gloves, snow pants, boots. Yeah, like it's cold up top there. You can see, you can see the snow on the top of the mountain. Let me find the glacier.
Right. So it probably never melts, right?
Yeah, so there's the glaciers on the top of Kilimanjaro. So that's the glacier.
That picture is amazing.
So that's,
Wow.
so there's that. But yeah, so you get to the top of the crater. Yes, you can see here. You're at the top of the crater, and then inside there's, down in there. So once you get to the top, it's still like another 45 minutes along the rim of the crater. There's like another 45 minutes along the rim of the crater to technically get to the highest point on the mountain. So that part's easier because it's flatter, but it's still a little bit of elevation climb. So you get all the way to the top of that, and then yeah, basically, just the amazing views up top there. You see all the glaciers, watch the sunrise. But yeah, it's not the same as Machu Picchu. Like, I would say I'm glad I did Machu Picchu first and then did this. But yeah, there's no like archaeological sites or anything. Like there's no wildlife up there. It's just, either the sand, gravel, or the glaciers. But the glaciers are so beautiful. And then basically you have to go back down. So you almost kind of like ski down the mountain because it's very sandy and it's like so straight down. So you kind of like slide down the mountain.
How long does it take you to do that?
To get down?
Yeah.
To get down.
To get down.
Or to get down is an hour. It's like 7 hours to get up and then like 45 minutes to an hour to get back down. It's not bad at all.
Okay.
Yeah, so then what we did is we went back down to camp, had lunch, hung out there for a few hours, and then, I think we spent the night there, and then the next morning you wake up and then you go down. Like, so what took you 7 days to get up, you go down in 1 day.
Okay, very nice. If anybody wanted to do one or the other, which one would you recommend? And why?
So I think it depends on what your interest is, so I think if I had to pick just one, I probably would say Machu Picchu, just because there's more going on throughout the trek. It's like I said, there's the villages, there's the archaeological sites along the way, so there's a little more interest. It's a little easier of a hike. Tanzania is a little harder. It's a little more just like the end goal of like getting to the top kind of thing. Machu Picchu, like I said, the payout is when you get to the Machu Picchu, you also see the beautiful site of Machu Picchu, so I think if you had to pick just one, maybe Machu Picchu. That's why I picked Machu Picchu first. But then, yeah, I think I would definitely, having done both, I would do Machu Picchu first, and then if you can do Tanzania, do Kilimanjaro.
So you have run marathons.
Mm-hmm.
Are any of these harder than running a marathon?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Kilimanjaro is definitely harder than running a marathon, yeah. Just because, the top of it's at 19,000 something feet, like, so, just the air is very thin up there. And like I said, that last day, it's like 7 hours of really pushing hard. So like if you like your worst marathon, you're maybe spending, marathons I usually do between 4.5 and 6 hours, depending on how well I'm trained and what shape I'm in. So this was definitely longer than any marathon I've ever done. And you're also doing it like you're shuffling along because like it's very hard to breathe. So, I definitely recommend if you can do some kind of altitude training. Like one of the guys that on the trip, he lives in Colorado. So he climbs like 14,000 foot or 15,000 foot mountains all the time. So for him, it was a lot easier because he was like already acclimated to, and some people are just good at altitude. Like there was the one kid, so like the family, they brought their 2 kids. The one girl was 25 and then their son was 22, and he was completely unbothered by the altitude, the son. Like when they got to the top, so when you get to the top, there's like a trek around the rim of the crater. It's like 2 miles. Him and the guide ran it, and like
wow.
like I said, I could not take a step more than like a foot in front of me. Like I was shuffling along, and I see the 2 of them literally come running by me because they were like running around the inside of this crater. It was crazy at 19,000 feet. I don't know how he did it, but like some people aren't bothered by the altitude, so it's easier. But I would definitely say this is definitely harder than running a marathon. Yeah.
Very nice. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I was really looking forward to this. So if anybody had any questions, do you have an Instagram account or anything? If anybody, when they listen or watch this.
Yeah, so sure. My Instagram account is LLoganR,
Okay.
LOGANR, and that's my Instagram account. So
yeah, I'll put it below. Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, I'm sure, people who get.
Feel free to message me. Yeah. I'd
love
talking about this kind of stuff.
This was awesome.
Okay.
And when I do it, either one or both, hopefully I'll make sure to let you know so you can give me more insight.
Yeah, definitely let me know. But yeah, I definitely recommend, if it's on your bucket list, definitely something you should do. Like, I highly recommend both. They're both great experiences. So yeah. Trips of a lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
All right. Take care.
Have a great day.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.